Welcome back to the show. Well, from fears from fallout of tariffs, the affordability crisis, and even climate change, 2025 is already proving to be a very challenging year for the Canadian real estate market.
But what could this all mean for the real estate trends we'll be seeing over the next year? Our next guest is a real estate broker here to break down the headlines and what they mean for the market. Welcome back to The Social, Erica Reddy.
Erica, I'm so glad you're here to have this very important conversation. So let's just start with the basics. Talk to us about the current state of the Canadian real estate market. What are we dealing with right now?
So we are dealing with a bumpier start. There's no better way to put it. Jan, Feb, March, they've been tough months. There's a lot happening to the south of the border. There's a lot of talk. And people are just a little bit uneasy. Now, I will say, that being said, there's a little pep in everybody's step with the spring around the corner, and that is traditionally when we see the real estate market really start to kick off.
Okay.
So I want to ask you about the interest rate cuts made by the Bank of Canada. Do you think this will give a significant boost to the real estate market?
So I think it's really going to help. I mean, at the end of the day, affordability is the cornerstone of somebody's purchase. And so the lower the interest becomes, obviously, the more affordable the house becomes. But affordability is still a huge issue for Canadians. So it's a little bit of a kind of, you know, one gives to the other, but I do think it's definitely going to help with the market.
Okay, so we know that tariffs are the big issue that's on everyone's mind right now. In what ways do you think that the turmoil south of the border could actually impact the market directly?
So, I mean, this is a great question. This is probably talked about every single day. So net, I think the challenge with the tariffs is there's a lot of hesitation, trepidation. There's a lot of unknown. Nobody really knows the exact impact at this point in time, but there's a lot of speculation of what it is going to be. So I think just that pause, that hesitation, we're already seeing it. Then you add in potential, you know, tariffs with supplies and building and construction. I think there's a lot that could unfold that could be tricky for people.
Can we talk about that? Because my husband's a contractor, so we just talk tariffs all the time. He says aluminum, steel, lumber. How is tariff talk impacting things like even home renos?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think this is a great question and a great point because the cost, I mean, if you think back to COVID, I feel like we woke up and lumber quadrupled overnight. And then all of a sudden, everybody's renovation costs went exponentially higher. So to your point, where you've got people that are going, okay, should I renovate and stay in place or should I potentially move? Normally, the renovation makes more sense than moving, but if the cost of renovations massively increase, you might actually see people moving before they renovate.
All right, so Erica, there is a housing affordability crisis going on in this country. And I understand earlier in this month in Toronto, the city and the government of Canada announced a $2.5 billion agreement to build more rental homes. So how is that going to help the issue?
So I think this is very much needed. I mean, there's, as I say to people all the time, there's multiple silos in the real estate market and, you know, assisted government, housing, rentals, et cetera, we need it. I think sometimes people get, you know, a little bit nervous. Oh, well, what if we have too much of this? What happens to my property value? I don't think that's something people need to be worried about because I really believe it's an important silo within the real estate market, but it's not necessarily going to impact your property value if that's something you're worried about.
Okay.
Well, you know, after the wildfires we saw in Alberta last year, particularly in Jasper, there were so many conversations around climate migration and whether people living in areas with extreme weather should consider moving to areas that are a bit more stable. How do home buyers take that into consideration right now?
So, I mean, I think there are so many things on people's minds, but I do believe this is one that's really important. And I think there's kind of two parts to it. There's obviously the large scale, you know, fires, you know, floods, those kinds of things. But then in addition to that, I mean, think back to last summer. We had that crazy rainstorm where we had torrential rain in hours? And everybody ended up with floods. What I think, you know, the big scale fires, et cetera, and the floods, it's really putting top of mind insurance. What is actually covered by insurance? What can people get insurance for? Because that, I think, is actually even a bigger driver to where people are potentially looking to purchase and their purchasing decisions.
Yeah, that's a big one. So listen, we're in trying times. There's a lot of unpredictability, instability, a lot of unknowns. But what is your advice right now to people who are out there maybe starting to look for a home? They need to look for a home.
For sure. So, I mean, life goes on. Regardless sometimes of what the market's doing, life does carry on. So I think my biggest piece of advice to people is as best as you can, if you can move laterally in the market. So let's say you're in the condo to condo or house to house, that's probably going to be your smoothest move because you're within the same market sector. If you have to move in a different sector, for example, a condo to a house or say a house to a rural community, then I think you really need to understand the difference between those two markets because one market's not necessarily going to be the same as the other.
Yeah, and let's keep talking about condos because I own a condo and I know that the condo market is underperforming, to put it nicely. So does that provide an opportunity for buyers right now? Can they take advantage of that?
I think so. So, I mean, naturally, people are skittish when there's lots of bad news headlines, and to put it mildly, the condo market is underperforming. But where I think there's huge opportunity is probably in the next 3 to 5 years if you have a condo, because what we're seeing right now is a complete freeze in all pre-construction and all development. And so if we fast forward, say 3 or 5 years, we're not gonna have all that inventory that we've been used to having come into the marketplace. So then all of a sudden we don't have the inventory, but we have buyers. So I really think the sweet spot is when we get that kind of, balance of supply and demand, you'll really see the demand come back.
Okay, good.
Okay, so before we let you go, are there any trends in your forecast that we should be really focused in on or aware of in this year?
So trends that you're starting to see and are continuing to unfold, I would say the biggest one is still seeing some people that are working from home. And so that trend of, okay, now this is permanent, and moving perhaps out of a city center into a more rural community, you could see a little bit more of a rise in the rural communities. And then in the city centers, you're definitely seeing more mixed use, triplexes, fourplexes, all of that, along with a lot more development having commercial, office, residential, everything together. So you're seeing a lot of kind of two very different trends, but those I would say are the ones emerging.
Interesting. All right, so Erica, thank you so much for stopping by with all this very important information about our real estate market. For those of you at home, stay right where you are. We'll be right back.
Hey, you, come a bit closer. We've got so many more must-see interviews, spicy debates, lifestyle tips, and pop culture moments. So subscribe to our channel by tapping the logo below and don't miss out.